Division 1 is personnel and communications. The name by itself, personnel and communications, already tells us that this is a very interesting subject, especially when it comes to business. You know, all executives without exception can tell you that personnel and communications is a very important area. And at the same time, it happens to be the most problematic one. But why is it that this subject is the one that brings so much trouble and disappointment? Here is the answer. There is simply no education in our society about how people behave, about who a certain person really is, how to predict that person's behavior, no education on how to allow for that human factor in terms of industry and business relations. Of course, you might want to disagree with this and say, just wait a minute, what about psychology? Actually, that is the profession and the job which is meant to solve all of that by definition. They are precisely the ones by definition who are supposed to know and understand how people think and behave. I want to give you a relevant example out of my own experience. A while ago, we posted an advertisement about a human resource manager in one of my companies. And we were trying to hire salesmen at the same time. As is well known, good salesmen are not easy to find because they are in real demand like air is, in every company, right? So there was a minimal response to the salesman ad, but a stack of resumes that came in response to the human resources manager position. What do you think they had put down in the education section? In most of the applicants' resumes that I looked over, they'd put down in this section the word psychologist. Besides this, most of these applicants had a relatively extensive work experience and had worked for many companies. You would ask, of course, what's wrong with an extensive work experience? Of course, it would seem at first glance that, well, of course, this person has worked all over, they probably know a lot, etc. That's when the joke about Uncatchable Joe comes to mind. Do you know about this? It goes like this. No one can catch the uncatchable Joe. Why, says the other. Well, no one really wants or needs him. So, it's kind of similar here too. When I saw these two data about salesmen and about human resources managers, I concluded that productive people are always busy, and unproductive ones are like the uncatchable Joe. This was the moment when my last hope bid me farewell. Hope that someone had some inkling or idea about personnel in business. There is one more thing I want to tell you here. There is a very fashionable word in business today, the word HR. It comes from the English words human resource, which means just that someone in HR should be a specialist in the area of human resources. No more, no less. And it's believed that this person is over personnel in a company and that he or she is designated to solve all the possible problems that come up there. I had the opportunity to deal with these HRists on more than one occasion. I asked a very simple and the most proper, as I see it, question that one could ask of any staff member. I asked them, "Tell me, Mr. HR, what's the result of your work?" In response, I heard and saw something like this. Result, you mean? Well, but why are you asking me this? How would you like me to answer you? I mean, this actually has to do with individual work, with people. What a stupid question, really. Do you understand yourself, what you're asking me, huh? Actually, really, it's a creative process. And people, it's very refined. You see, well, you need to have an individual approach to everyone. It's all very... But you talk about results. Don't make the subject so primitive. Why would you even ask such a question? We're people that go by the book here. Something along those lines. Of course, I might be exaggerating a bit, but that was the essence. You know, practical people are very simple. You ask them, "What's your result?" And they say, "I get these results," without hesitation. "Did you produce it?" "Yes." "Here's the money for you." "Good job. Thanks a lot for your work." Non-productive ones are always a bit this and that. But you pay the money anyways. Let's look at the functions of the first division. And if you remember, it has 3 departments. 1, 2, 3. Let's look at them in order. Alright. Here's the first department and the first function. We'll label it like this: the org board and the flows of the company. What does that mean? Look, basically the first department, or even the first division, is a department where we greet our visitors. That's the place where we get calls, emails, mail, all sorts of correspondence, and whatnot. So, we get the different flows of particles here, and this is the place where we have to direct them correctly throughout the org board. So a girl, the receptionist, she needs to know precisely that this visitor has to be directed to that place on the org board. This call has to go to this post of that job, and that letter needs to be directed over here, etc. So, it's in this department on the org board that the flows of the company and how the communication should flow are sorted out on the org board. But the org board has to be updated. Of course. You see, it's not made in stone. Life changes, people get fired, new people come, maybe different posts come into being on the org board. I don't know. Whatever. So someone has to make sure that the org board is in present time, right? Besides, the org board shows us where we need to hire people, where we have empty posts or blanks on the org board. That's where the second function comes in, personal procurement. I'm sure that you had something to do with personal procurement at some time. Either you hired someone personally, or you've been an applicant, one or the other. And here's where we can remember our principle of be, do, have. Let's take a look at it once again. When we studied that principle, I remember that we came to an agreement that a person should get paid for results. Right? Now, let's take a look at what happens at the interview. What were you asked? You were asked, who was your last employer? Now, where is that? That's at B. We were asked what education we have had, and again, that's at B. They asked us, what was your marriage status? And where do you live? We were asked, and again, that's B. We were asked, what were your duties of your last job? That's do. What I want to emphasize here is that we were asked just about anything during the interview except about the results you produced. You see, if I'm the owner and I want to hire a certain person and pay him for the result, then I care little what his education is. The only thing I'm interested in is if he's going to create something productive, something useful in the company or not. And if he had no results at his last job, something I can find out about, then I have no reason to suppose that he's going to do something useful for me. I'm not saying that all this information about one's education, etc., is not important. but it's definitely secondary to the product the person creates. There is one more significant mistake made by executives in relation to personnel that I want to really demonstrate to you. It's believed that the most productive staff should be on the front lines, with clients, suppliers, money. That's where the profits are forged. But the personnel department is just papers, administrative work, and filling out the employment record book for a person, taking an application, conducting an interview, etc. Here we have the leftover personnel principle where it's believed any old Joe Blow can do the work. And it's also thought if Joe Blow can't make it on the front lines, but can make it there, then he's less productive than the guys who are bringing in the profit into the company. And that's where the key mistake lies. Because there is a law which states that like attracts like. So if Joe Blow is not productive, he will hire like people. You see? So, don't be surprised if you then start having a lot of problems and difficulties with badly hired personnel. That is, I want to bring your attention to the fact that a well-carried-out personnel procurement function can resolve a majority of your problems. So, the conclusion follows that Division 1 has to have the most productive people. After that, the flow of Department 1 takes us to a function of personal records. There is no sense talking about it much, as that function is most usually carried out, duly in most companies, by reason of law and by reason of definition. But the thing that follows is of special mention, because the next functions are missing in most companies as a general rule. They're missing close to 90% of the way, if not that. And the next function in this department, which is equally important, has to do with hats. Let's call this function creating hats. Because before you can teach someone a certain job, you have to have a hat for them. And so, let's give this word another relevant definition, which has to do with what we're talking about. Here it is. Hat, a term used to describe the write-ups, check sheets and packs that outline the purposes, know-how and duties of a post. It exists in folders and packs and is trained in on the person on the post. L. Ron Hubbard. There was a word check sheet in the definition. Let's define that as well at once. A check sheet is a form which sets out the exact sequence of items to be studied or done by a student in order, item by item, on a course. L. Ron Hubbard. So, creating a hat is only half the work. Now the important thing is hatting the staff. That's the new word we have here, but it explains its own meaning. You know, very often when businessmen hear the word hat, they ask if it's the same as the job description. But I want to tell you that it's not the same. The way that a job description is written and thought of today, it's not even 10% or even a lot less of what a real, well-written, valuable hat should be. Every well-written, complete and true hat is of colossal value to any company. Because with every hat written down, the company acquires more and more freedom and an opportunity to expand, if you will. The most clear example of that is a company known to everyone around the world, McDonald's. They do an absolutely stellar job of those two functions, writing hats and hatting people. And you could say that that's the exact reason why this company is so successful and why it provokes some degree of envy in most people as to how well it's all organized.